Hey friends, it's Just the Gems. I'm Brandon. When I declared 2024 to be the year of trails and decided to dedicate a sizable portion of my content to trails coverage, everyone told me it couldn't be done. Don't be a fool, they said. Also, your fashion sense is lacking and you could use a haircut. Those last couple hurt, I'll be honest. And maybe I am a fool, but darn it, I want to talk about trails some more. This is a series of JRPGs that fills a niche that basically no other JRPG series was willing to tackle, that of the long, ongoing narrative. 20 years now the story has been going on, with glorious, and some might even say, obsessive continuity. I think you can see this as both good and bad. Good, because those of us who are invested in this story, these characters, this world, are able to continue to enjoy one of the best, long unfolding narratives ever put to the screen. Bad, because newcomers are intimidated by the scope of it all at best, and completely turned off at worst. And if that's you, well, let me just say, I get it. It's the same reason I don't want to start watching One Piece. There's just too much. Too many episodes. How would I even find the time? So does that make me a hypocrite for saying that even if you're wary about starting the Trails series, you absolutely need to anyway? Well, yes. I'll own it. I'll wear whatever badge of shame is necessary to get you to try this series, because I think you're going to love it, and the rising tide of this fandom raises all ships. If you missed it, I reviewed the first chapter of Trails in the Sky. You should check that out to get a sense for the beginning of this series. But today, I want to talk about the rest of the Sky arc. That means we're covering Trails in the Sky second chapter, and Trails in the Sky the third. Let's get into it. I considered doing a dueling, reviewing for these two games, but ultimately, I decided against it. Not because it wouldn't be possible to cover them that way, but because at the end of the day, I don't really think of Trails games as separate games in and of themselves. They're chapters of one big, huge, giant game, at least to me. And so trying to cover them as if they weren't wouldn't come across as honest, in my opinion. So instead, I'm going to forego the pretense that I'm reviewing these games in some sort of unbiased, objective way, and instead just tell you why you need to play them. To quickly cover gameplay, once again, I invite you to check out my review of Trails in the Sky FC for more information on that, because not a ton has changed here. Sky SC does introduce combination crafts, which allow a couple of party members with enough craft points built up to use a more powerful combo move. That's pretty cool, but it's not an earth-shattering change, and I'll be perfectly honest, I forgot that I could even do them until about 2/3 of the way into the game. Sky the Third doesn't really bring much new to the battle side of things, but the moment-to-moment gameplay does differ quite a bit from its predecessors. More on that later. But what I want to focus on the most is the story, so let's go. After the massive revelations at the very end of Trails in the Sky FC, Estelle finds herself flying solo for a while. That's right, no Joshua for the time being. She does some soul searching and decides it's time to better herself. That's hard to do when you're already the best, but hey, props to her for giving it a go. So she heads off to the mountains with Annalise, who would be the best if Estelle didn't exist. She's second best, and that's not bad. Anyway, Annalise is another bracer, just slightly older than Estelle, and a practitioner of the 8 leaves, 1 blade sword technique. For those of you interested in following plot threads throughout the course of this very long series, take note of the name of that sword style. So Estelle and Annalise train in the mountains for a bit, and then it's back to work. This is where the cynical might think that Sky SC is just retreading old ground. And the frustrating thing is that the darn cynics are sort of right. You are retreading old ground, as this game still takes place within the country of Liberl, and you're going to be revisiting basically every place you visited in the first game. Now, that doesn't mean there aren't other areas you'll also get to explore, but if you're going into this expecting a whole bunch of new terrain to cover straight away, you're going to be disappointed. On the positive side, though, your journey in Sky FC has basically familiarized you with every nook and cranny of this nation, so you can strut around with all the confidence of a seasoned cartographer. You'll visit each region of the country again, following new threads that all seem to be connected to the complicated tapestry being weaved by Ouroboros, the sinister society we only heard the slightest mention of in Sky FC. And when it comes to plot threads that run the course of the entire series, there's not a thicker thread than Ouroboros. Its members are divided up between the rank-and-file rabble, usually mercenaries and other nameless doofs they hire to do their dirty work, and the more important crew. The next level up are the Enforcers, of which you will meet several in SC alone. Above them are the Anguis, a group much more hidden in the shadows. And above them is the Grandmaster. If you're expecting to get a healthy dose of info on the Grandmaster in Trails in the Sky SC, then you don't fully understand the slow drip storytelling of this series. If you want a Keurig JRPG, there are plenty of those out there for that quick gratification. This ain't that. Even though you'll quickly find yourself surrounded by familiar faces, there's a newbie in the mix as well in the form of Kevin Graham. He has weird green hair that I've always found off-putting, but he was and remains one of my favorite Trails characters. His addition to the cast, as sporadic as his appearances are for the majority of the plot, might lead you to believe he's not all that important and is just there to meet some new character quota. Nothing could be further from the truth. Since this is a spoiler-free review, I won't go into why. But suffice to say, Kevin represents the larger Trails plot beginning to show itself. All told, the quest you go on in Sky SC is so much bigger than FC's. Not only are you revisiting old locations, but you're faced with a bunch of new dungeons, and even some familiar places take on a new form, let's say. The story is so much more focused this time because, as I mentioned in the previous review, Sky FC was all about foundation building. SC is about paying all that preparation off. The big bads finally take center stage, and even though their plan is somewhat mysterious even until the very end, you quickly get a sense for the enormous stakes. And after the bombastic finale of Trails in the Sky SC, we move on to the third, which could not possibly be more different. If SC was about paying off all the plot foundation laid in the previous chapter, then the third is about seeding the ground with growth potential that will have an impact on the whole series moving forward. So it's foundational in a sense, but it sidesteps most of the issues people sometimes have with the foundational Trails games by focusing on backstories and lore. The protagonists this time are Kevin and Reese. Kevin, of course, we met in SC, but Reese is brand new. She's a nun, or I guess like some sort of sword-wielding assistant to Kevin. They're both members of the Gralsritter, which is the secretive sect of the World Church that deals with hunting down mysterious relics from ancient times. In the few months since SC concluded, the country of Liberl has stumbled upon one of these relics, and they call in Kevin to take a look. He and Reese are subsequently transported by this relic to the world of Phantasma. This is like another dimension where places that Kevin is familiar with are recreated from his mind. As Kevin and Reese explore Phantasma, they find the key players from the previous Sky games, and naturally they all team up to find out how to escape. I'm obviously not going to spoil the plot, but to be honest, there isn't a ton of plot in the third. Like I said, this game is almost all backstory and lore building. It's frankly a pretty darn bold experiment in storytelling, and the fact that Trails pulled this off so early into the series run is remarkable. It helps that all your favorite characters are there and that you can pretty freely switch them in and out of your party, unlike previous entries that often forced you into specific party makeups. It also introduces fast travel, which makes getting around the sort of underwhelming dungeons much more pleasant. Wow, I just described the dungeons as underwhelming. Maybe I am unbiased and objective. The gameplay loop of the third involves exploring the dungeons and finding your friends, as well as various doors. These doors require certain party members in order to open, and each of them will give you its own sort of short story within the confines of the overarching plot. These are largely backstory, and some of them involve very little or no actual gameplay. Think of them as sort of visual novel excursions away from the main game. Some of the doors do involve gameplay, and some of them are even minigame focused, something that I was personally not the most fond of. But I suppose your mileage will vary depending on how much you like minigames. The thing is, every one of these doors has something interesting to reveal about the world. Well, interesting or heartbreaking, depending on the door. There's some heavy stuff in the third. Let's just say, not every character has a very happy history. But despite the fact that so much of the story in this game is backstory, it's simultaneously setting the stage for things that will happen in later games. You really begin to feel how interconnected this world and these people are. I want to give you some examples, but doing it in a spoiler-free way that is simultaneously engaging is a challenge. But I think I can do it. One door you enter gives you a tragic backstory for a character you met in the previous game. However, it also lays the groundwork for one of the major plot points in the next game, Trails from Zero. Another door tells you the story of the Salt Pail, which is an item that shows up super briefly in the previous game, but hangs heavy over the entire story as one of these sort of largely unexplainable phenomena that color our understanding of this world. Another door has you shooting down attacking enemies from an airship in a minigame. I didn't like that one. I'm really bad at it. Okay, so that one doesn't have any story in it really. Though the events in that door do get brought up in a piece of dialogue in a subsequent game because these writers are insane. I've heard some people say that you can safely skip Trails in the Sky the Third. And I'll be honest, in my first go around with Trails, I skipped it too. In my defense, it wasn't available in English at the time, but still, yeah, I was able to play and understand the story without playing the third. But skipping it is doing yourself a huge injustice. If the foundational games in each Trails arc are about prepping you for the action to come in that arc, then Trails in the Sky the Third is prepping you for what's to come and enriching everything you've experienced so far. I understand the trepidation you might be feeling about getting into a series of this size. Like I said, I felt similarly about a lot of things. But if you can make an exception for this series, if you can put all that trepidation aside and just give these games a chance, I think you're gonna fall in love with them. I also understand maybe not wanting to start with games that are so old. 20-ish years old at this point. I will point out that all the Sky games on Steam have some nice quality of life enhancements, but still, these are fundamentally very old games. And I'll never tell anyone they're wrong for starting with a different game in the series. You do you. But I will fervently endorse investing in this series from the very beginning, taking it step by step, taking your time. It's not going anywhere after all. Take it at your own pace and let yourself get absorbed into the world. You have very little to lose by trying it out, and potentially a lot to gain. Anyway, that's it. Have you played Sky SC in the third? Let me know what you think of them down in the comments. I hope you enjoyed this, and please stick around for more Trails content to come. Until next time. Bye. They're both members of the Gralsritter, which is the secretive sect. And each of them will give you its own sort of short story within the These sentences are so long.